how will UCLA do in the Big Ten? What tier can we add UCLA to in the Big Ten? So if you've not been following this kind of series, we have a tier list that I've kind of gathered from others who've talked about this, and the tiers are in tier 1, Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan. Tier 2, these are kind of like they contend somewhat frequently, but they're not going to be a contender every single year. Iowa, Penn State, Washington, Wisconsin. I've had people tell me Washington doesn't belong in that tier. That's fine, but that's not what other people seem to be saying. These aren't my personal tiers. These are what I have gathered from other people. Tier 3, Minnesota, Michigan State, USC. If it was me personally, I'd probably flip USC and Washington. However, it is what it is. And then tier 4, Maryland, Nebraska, Northwestern, UCLA. Zach, would you agree that UCLA is kind of in that tier where we're going to see them play out similarly? Obviously, they don't have the history of a Nebraska, but do you think that they're going to be a similar team to, say, a Maryland, Nebraska, Northwestern in the Big Ten?
Yeah, I mean, I think historically, I'd put them in between that tier 4, tier 3. They've got a tough road to hoe, though, in this first season. And I'll just start with the obvious, like they lost their coach. Right. Their recruiting has not been great. They lost a ton of transfers. And while I think Deshaun Foster is, he was a running backs coach that was elevated to the head coach, but they've kept their coaching staff largely intact. Eric Bieniemy comes over to be the offensive coordinator, which I think is a home run hire.
Right.
But here's the big issue for me for next year. If you look at their schedule in 2023, they played 4 Power 5 teams with a winning record and lost to 3 of them.
Ooh.
They play 7 Power 4, Power 5, however you want to classify them, Power 5 teams that finish with a winning record, and 2 more teams, and maybe even 3 that I would argue are on the upswing. So like if you look at the schedule, this is their schedule. And I feel like we keep saying this about the Pac-12 schools coming over, but this is the schedule. At Hawaii, then they're off. Indiana at home. Like that should be a win, but I think Curt Cignetti might have those boys ready to play.
Yeah.
At LSU, which I don't understand. Like LSU plays both UCLA and USC. I don't know why, but they play at LSU.
Yeah.
Then the next week they play Oregon. And then the next week they play at Penn State. So that's 3 potentially top 10 teams, 2 of them away on the East Coast. Like that's just disaster.
Yeah. They did not set themselves well. Like they did not set themselves up well coming into the Big Ten with all that going on.
Yeah. And that's just the first 5 games. Yeah. Minnesota at Rutgers, like Minnesota, I think we both think they'll be a little bit better next year. They at Rutgers, which I think they're continuing to grow as a program. Like that's not a gimme. Like I think Rutgers, especially at Rutgers, that's potentially a loss. At Nebraska, again, not a winning record, but they're, I think they're going to be a lot better in year 2 under Matt Rule. Iowa, they're tough. At Washington, which that's a tough place to play. USC and then Fresno State. Find me 5 wins for UCLA.
I think their over-under this year is 5.5.
That's too high.
Yeah. I take the under.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think like Chip Kelly, kind of saw the writing on the wall here, right? Like he knew what was coming up, and he knew that the fans weren't exactly happy with him. I was watching videos today of Chip Kelly giving his press conference to Ohio State, and like I've seen more UCLA fans in the comments on YouTube there than I've ever seen on Twitter.
Oh no.
They were just, there wasn't even a ton of them, but they were like, get ready to have a terrible coach, Ohio State, and get ready for they have no love loss over Chip Kelly over there. So, and I think Chip Kelly is probably glad that he moved on because he saw that schedule and was like, yep, I'm probably getting fired next year because I'm going to be, 3-9 or 2-10 or something like that. So definitely not an easy situation for them. Brian likes our comp for Maryland. He says Maryland is a good comp for UCLA. They can be good enough to be a spoiler, but not seriously contend for a title. I agree. What do you think, Zach?
I think to that, so I didn't know this until I looked into Bieniemy. He was UCLA's recruiting coordinator in 2005.
Yeah.
Which, that was, ages ago, and recruiting has advanced so much with NIL and whatnot. But it was a sneaky good hire from a recruiting standpoint. One is because he knows that that's part of the job, but two, he can go into any recruit's home and say, I coached Patrick Mahomes and won a couple Super Bowls. But I think that's the key. Chip Kelly didn't want to recruit. Like, let's just call a spade a spade. Yeah. Like, he didn't. He wants to coach. He doesn't want to recruit. And if you're going to be successful at UCLA, you've got to be able to recruit. And so that's why next year is going to be a disaster, I think. But I agree with Brian and you, JR. I think that comp, Maryland, and maybe even I think we've seen UCLA do some things where they've knocked off SEC teams and done well. But I don't think consistent Big Ten player is in the cards.
No, I agree. I think a tier where they're around Maryland fits. I think Nebraska is probably better than them. I'd probably put Nebraska in the tier above them personally if we're talking about some of these lower tiers. But then Northwestern, they're not going to be on the level Northwestern is, where Northwestern can literally go from winning the Big Ten West to the next year, having one win on the season. I don't think they're going to be there. However, they're probably going to be middle of the pack. So I guess if you're talking about average wins in 2 years, yes, I suppose they would be a good comp for Northwestern. But no, I agree. I'm excited for UCLA to be in the conference because I think that adds another, California team out west, which will help. But if you ask how often are they going to contend, I think 5 to 10 years is generous. And maybe once every 20 years, I guess. I don't know.
If we're talking about best uniforms, though, those powder blues are
those shiny helmets.
Oh, yeah. I wish Ohio State and Michigan would do the same thing that USC and UCLA does and play home and home jerseys.
Yep.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
People vie for that every year, and every year I'm like, you are so right. I would love to see that. Thanks for listening to the Big Ten Huddle. Please do like and subscribe. We appreciate that. If this was your first time listening, we are the Big Ten Huddle. We cover all things Big Ten football and basketball. We have a long episode every Sunday, Tuesday, and Wednesday night, all at 9 o'clock. So come in, check us out, get in the chat, let us know what you're thinking. We would love to have you join us and learn more about the Big Ten.